Hey number ones, welcome back to Metatron's Academy. So today I wanted to check out a video with you that I thought looked really interesting from the title. I still haven't watched it, so this is going to be a first impression. Let's check it out. So the title is English Just Badly Pronounced French? From Rob Words, which is a channel with 613,000 subscribers, which I do believe is mostly about languages, isn't it? Yeah, I think so. Will it translate words, runes? Yeah, definitely linguistic content mostly. Be fun to check out several of his videos, but I want to start with this one, The Truth About Japanese. I'm so going to react to that one next, but let's do this one first.
The English language doesn't exist. It's just badly pronounced French. Those aren't my words. They're supposedly the words of this 20th century French statesman. And they're the name of a book by this French linguistics professor who thinks the English-speaking world should be grateful to France.
C'est grâce au français que l'anglais est international.
Is he right? How French is English after all?
Well, he did say that it's thanks to French that English it is international. So, yeah, the first one was kind of, obviously a French would say that, I imagine. But the second one, I mean...
Let's find out in another Rob Words.
Cool.
So English is a Germanic language. Some people will try to tell you it isn't for reasons that will become clear, but it is.
I agree with him. It is a Germanic language because of its structure and core vocabulary, but it is so strongly influenced by both French, in fact, medieval Norman French, Italian, Latin. There's a bit of Greek in there, but then again, there's a bit of Greek in everything. But at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, it is a Germanic language at its core, but I oftentimes like to say that it's a Germanic language that enjoys pretending to be a Romance language, because it is true. I mean, there is a big chunk of vocabulary. Is it up to 40%? I'm sure he'll tell us. That comes from Latin in either directly because of the Romance or through one of the Romance languages.
Old English was brought to the British Isles by Germanic tribes. It was closely related to the languages that became German and Dutch. And in fact, it's not totally ridiculous to claim that a modern-day German would have a better chance of understanding Old English than a modern-day Brit.
That's fascinating, actually. I never thought of it that way. I really like this video.
Old English is really nothing like the English that we speak today. It had grammatical gender, you had to put words in a different order, and it had all these complicated variable endings for nouns, adjectives, and verbs.
Not to mention, of course, Old English would be before GVS, or the Great Vowel Shift, which was a monumental shift or change when it comes to the way modern English Anglophones pronounce their vowels. In fact, I want to say that when I look at Old English, or when I was taking Germanic philology as one of my classes at university, I do remember that whenever we were looking at how vowels were pronounced in Old English, it was actually a lot more natural to me, in the sense that it was easier to think that an I, it's a E, and the R is R, like the double O is O. Yeah, of course, there's two O, so why would you say, you know, moon, blood, and floor? Like, pick one.
But a millennium and a series of historical events have changed our language completely.
Yeah.
And perhaps the single biggest event was this. In 1066, the French arrived, specifically the Normans, and English would never be the same again. As Professor Cerquilini puts it in his book, without the Normans, English would today be a second Dutch. Would that be so bad? And the thing is, he's sort of right. When the Norman king, William the Conqueror, seizes the throne of England, he initiates a period of enormous linguistic change. He kicks out all the English nobles and replaces them with his pals.
He was Duke at the time, but then becomes, yeah, sure.
He sacks all the English bishops, bar one, and puts Normans in their place. And suddenly, anyone with any power in England is speaking French. And that remains the case for a few centuries. You know, one of England's most celebrated kings, particularly by English nationalists, Richard the Lionheart, spoke barely a word of English.
Doesn't necessarily matter. Depends what you mean by English. I think you're talking about Old English, I suppose. It was still a native of England, however. I mean, at the end of the day, once a few generations pass, you're from that country. At least that's the way I see it.
That's if he spoke any English at all. So French was the language of the elite. It became the language of government, chivalry, and art. All French words, by the way.
True.
As a result, French words from these fields start to stream into the English language. You needed to know them. to get anything done. And to this day, many of our words for power, justice, and culture are from French. Words like parliament, council, court, judge, prince, battle, painting, music. I could go on. And I will. Tax, bill, jury, prison, baron, duke, culture, theatre, mayor, minister. I could still go on.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, though, sometimes you have a choice. Like, oftentimes that's the word and that's the word. But there are situations in which you can choose to express the same concept, either using the Germanic rooted word or using the French or Latin rooted word. Let me see if I can think of something just off the top of my head, but something like diminish and abate. Diminish being the Latin rooted and abate being the Germanic one, or something like fatigue versus weariness. Weariness, I don't even know how to pronounce it, but you know, it's pretty much the same concept. It's just that they are, sometimes you have that option, and I think it's kind of neat when you do.
And I will. Words like attorney, rule, economy, faith, war, peace.
Yeah, for example, attorney, you could say lawyer. Now, given, is there a difference between attorney, lawyer, barrister? I'm sure there is if you look at it technically. I don't know that difference very much, but because it's not my field, I guess would be something I would look up if I needed to translate, for instance. But I mean, I'll speak to my attorney can be used interchangeably as I need to contact my lawyer.
And what also happens is the names for traders and artisans start to change too. They take on more prestigious sounding French names. The Old English fleshmonger is replaced by the Old French butcher. The tree wright becomes the carpenter. The chapman becomes the merchant.
Oh, it's so interesting though, because the Germanic rooted ones are so interesting to me.
We end up with barbers, drapers, grocers, masons, and tailors, all words from French. And the power dynamic between the lowly English and the Norman nobility is apparent even in our language today. We've ended up with two words for a lot of animals, an Old English derived one for when they're alive and a French one for when they're served up.
I've seen people contrasting this. This is what was taught to me as well at university, and I can't fault it, but I did see there was a video of someone that was saying, debunking this nonsense about the different words used for the meat and for the animal when alive, in the sense that when the animal is alive, it's the word Germanic because it's connected to the actual working class and farmers and all that, and then when it was, well, not farmers, but you know what I mean, and then instead when it's served up, the word is in French because the food was normally prepared and eaten mostly by the nobility. I mean, at the end of the day, not prepared, but you know what I mean. I mean, I'll have to watch that video and see if they actually have a point. Maybe it's a matter, maybe they're being pedantic, which I like being pedantic, but yeah, let's see what he says.
For dinner, we have cow and beef, sheep and mutton, deer and venison, because the English would encounter them on the farm and the Normans would encounter them on the plate.
And of course, this depends, because depending on the animal, there were animals, like for example, salmon was something that even low class could eat. I know that sounds kind of strange, but it really, really depends. I can't fault this, to be honest. So I'll have to watch the videos that try to do that and see where they're coming from.
You've perhaps heard all of that before. I'm by no means the first to point it out. In fact, Walter Scott tackled it way back in 1820 in Ivanhoe, his tale of an Anglo-Saxon noble family surrounded by Normans. In it, the jester, Wamba, says, "Old Alderman Ox continues to hold his Saxon epithet while he's under the charge of serfs and bondsmen such as thou, but becomes beef, a fiery French gallant, when he arrives before the worshipful jaws that are destined to consume him. Mynheer Calf, too, becomes Monsieur de Vaux in the like manner. He's Saxon when he requires tendance, and takes a Norman name when he becomes matter of enjoyment." Many of our words for a fancy banquet come from French too. A servant may bring you your dinner or serve you a bottle with supper. Loads more of these coming up. But if all this talk of French has got you thinking, man, I really should get round to learning another language, allow me to help you out with that, because viewers of this video can get a special discount at
As always, every YouTuber on the planet is smoother than me when it comes to connecting to their sponsors. Okay, different dialects that could be, oh yeah, of course, because some of the words that come into modern English are actually coming from Norman French, which is different from Parisian French, which has become the standard now, I suppose, after French kings. Nice English words in French. Yeah, the opposite happens too, absolutely. Particularly now that English has become pretty much the lingua franca, even though the French don't like that. H dropping. Oh, I want to see this one. I want to see this one.
And could it even no see in a lot of job titles like Attorney General, Procurator Fiscal,
Cool.
Notary Public, or when we speak of an heir apparent? And could it even be that the French changed the way we pronounce the words we already had? Almost certainly, yes, because during the Middle English period, H's start dropping like flies to an horrible extent, especially at the start of words. In Old English, the words for lord and lady both began with an H. We also see H dropping that's more familiar to us now, i.e. H is being dropped before vowels.
Cockneys would be proud.
Far from it being something that was seen as a sign of a lack of education back then, as it occasionally is now, it was probably seen as the opposite. Because who's terrible at H's?
I would like to buy a hamburger.
To drop your H's was to sound more French and therefore more prestigious. This might even explain why
I'll have to double check that one, but it sounds really cool.
H dropping is even now more prevalent in areas that were historically of administrative and commercial significance, like London and the southeast of England, because in areas that would have had much less French influence, people are less likely to drop their H's.
That is fascinating. This is a really good channel.
Think about how some people in Scotland will say what or where.
Right.
They're emphasizing the H's, if anything.
Sometimes I think they do it in some parts of the United States as well.
And a remnant of this idea that dropping your H's like a French speaker is prestigious is the fact some people still insist on saying an hotel or an historic.
I have never heard that. I always say, oh, because basically what they're doing is an hotel, an historic, so they're dropping the H. Because if the H is pronounced, the N shouldn't be there.
Effectively treating the H like it isn't there. I think perhaps some people think an historic is more poetic. Which brings me on to another profound change that the French are very likely responsible for. Let me show you something. This is Caedmon's hymn. Written sometime in the 7th century, it's one of the earliest, if not the earliest, attested examples of an Old English poem. The key characteristic of this, and indeed all Germanic poetry from the time, is it contains amazing amounts of alliteration. It repeats the sounds at the starts of words over and over. Let's just have a listen to this marvellous reading by Kara Schallenberg. Note the alliteration, but also just see if you spot something else too.
Nu schulan herian, herfon riches word, mer to the smechte, and his mod ye thank. Werk wulder vader, swa he wonder gewees, age drichten, or unstelde.
So hopefully you heard the alliteration there, but did you also notice something else? It didn't rhyme. Now I know poetry doesn't have to rhyme, but in Old English it never did. It was all about the alliteration. Poetry in English only starts to rhyme after the French turn up.
Yeah, I was going to say after the French turn, yeah, because Shakespeare does rhyme, although it doesn't if you read it in modern English accent, but if you read it in a period accent, it will rhyme. Like moon does rhyme with blood, because it's morn and blood. But then again, of course, that's like way after the French arrived. So he's speaking specifically about something that predates the arrival in 1066, Battle of Hastings. Fascinating stuff.
Poetry was known for its rhymes at the end of lines, and that becomes the fashion in England too. Without doubt, the best-known writer of the Middle English period is Geoffrey Chaucer, and look at this. He ends every line with a lovely little rhyme. And Chaucer was well-versed, so to speak, in French.
Chaucer travaille dans les douanes à Londres, il travaille en français.
Yeah,
Oh, bien sûr, bien sûr. Merci beaucoup. Okay, so this is cool. I don't want to watch the whole thing as always. This is my policy when it comes to React videos. But this was a great finding, and I do believe that, I mean, didn't you enjoy that? I thought it was fascinating. And I like the presentation style. Very, very professional, unlike me. So, yeah, check him out. Link in the description, link in the pinned comment as well. And we might check out the more videos from this channel. If you enjoy that, do let me know. If there is a specific video that you think I should absolutely react to and provide commentary, do let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I think I'll just go for the Japanese one because that one you know, it's something that I may even be able to speak better than freaking Old English and kind of provide more commentary. Old English is something that is kind of, yeah, back in the day when I was at university, but that's a while ago now. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow for my next daily upload. Bye.